Start tearing the Vectrex apart. Looks like I got 2 screws and maybe 5 wires, and then the board going to the tube, which there was a zip tie helping it cling to the tube, but it's just on a socket and pulls off. Looks like I maybe some more wires here. No, they're on a connector on the board. And it looks like we could get away with just unscrewing that ground wire if your soldering iron is not up to the task of heating up these huge globs. Which I'm not sure if mine is or not. By the way, I just got done de-energizing the tube, and it did spark. It's a tiny, tiny little spark, but it was there. I have to turn this up. That took a little bit of effort, but it wasn't as hard as I had read, but maybe they just didn't have a properly sized iron. And it looks like we just got 2 little Phillips head screws. And the board will pull out. Okay. 4 power wires going to the logic board, and 4 wires coming from the tube. Let's see. XYZ axis. That should be taken note of. Can't tell which one is labeled, or which label is the label for this black and yellow combo, but the black is obviously by the 2 caps, and the yellow is up here by itself. Looks like they should just pop off. Thought you pushed them in, but you pull the tabs out and they slide off. And then a yellow and black combo there. Okay, the power board's off. Make it easier to check and replace any capacitors. believe the logic board is a little harder to remove. Something about the power knob. At least one mounting screw right there. Looks like possibly one on the cartridge slot. Maybe one more back in here. Not an easy way to get to it. But yes, it definitely needs to come out. I have to find a stubby screwdriver. This might work. Just barely. Yeah. I think someone said the power knob just pulls off, maybe? Yep. Possibly. It might have been possibly the last thing holding it in there. Well, it doesn't really feel like it. Oh, another screw to this side. Can't really tell. Somehow. This looks like something else in the power volume knob is keeping it in there. Maybe there's a nut on this side. I do see some like Loctite. some stuff on it, so I'm assuming that there is. See a few more large screws where maybe the whole plastic assembly and everything comes out. Cool. Get the tube out of there and the speaker, and you can give the rest of the plastic a really good wash. Now we've got access to that nut. Something to note is these screws are not all the same length. But the 5 that I took out to slide this out, it's fairly obvious. There's 3 long ones, 2 short ones, and it's fairly obvious where they go back. On the bottom side, the reset switch has a nut on the back. With Loctite. Doesn't need to come off, just needs to be loose enough to slide the switch down. And solder to the logic board. Cartridge port plastic off the top. Then we have our 4 wires from the transformer. on the power switch, or we could desolder the switch from the board, which is probably what I'm going to do. Get rid of all these cable assemblies as well. Because I am going to wash this board. Not much to see when I'm doing this, but this last pin's on a bit of a largest trace, sucking away all the heat. Got almost nothing on that one. Here we go. Looks like the middle one was free, but the other two are not. Very typical. And they're starting to come out of it. There we go. Now, do I want to wash this with that switch on there? I'm quite sure it's just a momentary, normally open, so I could desolder those wires and it wouldn't matter how they went back on. Neither of the wires are marked any different than the other. Looks like one is from the trace and one is the ground. Typical of a reset switch. Yeah, why not? Ugh. Soldering iron is burning the dust on the terminals. It smells nasty. A little extra help getting them out. That'll leave nice clean holes to solder it back in. See the holes in the power button are nice and open. Okay, that one's ready to wash. That is just super dirty. I believe, yeah, the top of the back of the top and back of the console itself is vented, so dust just falls right down on top of this board. And while I'm sitting here, before I wash it, I'll go ahead and check the caps. Looks like there are 4 electrolytic caps on this board. I believe all the caps inside of this console are Jamicon or something like that. How convenient. There's even a little plus sign on the bottom of the board. This one reads 4.9 microfarads, 0.099 ohms. It's supposed to be a 4.7, so that one's reading perfectly. And these big 3, you got a 220, and a 100 in the middle, and a 100 on the end. Marked again, nice. And they must all be, well, at least a couple of them are in parallel, because I get 339 microfarads and 0.08 ohms resistance. So I'm assuming the 220 and this 100 are in parallel. And the middle 100 is reading 91 microfarads and 0.08 ohms resistance. So apparently Jamicon was a very good brand back in the day. And I see no need to replace them. If they were on the power board, I might still replace them, but this is the logic board, so even though they might be power bypass caps here also, you may not, maybe on the 5-volt rail or something, not get worked as hard. So I'm going to go ahead and wash it and clean it up and pull the chips that are in sockets, which there's only 3, looks like. I'm going to pull them and maybe brush the legs with a steel brush and reinsert them. That'd be good to go back in. Okay, while the other board is soaking, check all these caps. Again, I believe they're all the same brand. There's a lot more of them. I think somebody said something about there might be a couple under the heat sink. Yeah, I see one. Possibly the other. And that wasn't a very good idea. But if they test out anything like the other ones did, then I won't have to worry about them anyway. Looks like 47, 47, 220, must be 10, $470, and these are both 1,000. Interesting to note that they're all 85C and not 105C. Oh my. I don't know if you can read that or not. This is the small one. It's pretty close on the capacity, but ESR is 7.6. That one's going to have to be replaced. Go ahead and mark that one. Yeah, same cap. This one's reading almost 50, and it's only 0.12 ESR. So that 47 was closer to okay. I believe this one was a 470 or something like that. Bigger one. Yeah, very nice. ESR still quite good. Was this the 221? Let's see. The smaller one right next to it. Wait, 1.7 might be kind of high for 10 microfarads. And then the larger one next to it. Overcapacitance, and yeah, look at that, it's lower ESR than the 10 microfarad. Cool. Go ahead and put a mark on that one. I know I've got 10s laying around here somewhere. And then the thousands. That is awfully low for 1,000. ESR is 0.8. Let's see. That one's low as well. They're not in series, are they? I would cut it in half. I might have to pull them and measure them out of circuit just to be sure. So right in here is the heat sink. You got the screws holding it. What I don't see is any little plus signs indicating a electro cap. I was almost sure I could see one down in there. Right there. I don't know why they wouldn't mark that like they did the rest. Well, let's do some more ones that we can see. $47. 47. Oh. 220. I think the huge ones are 10,000. And then these next big ones are 4,700. Yeah. So we got another 1,000. $47. I believe these are quite well labeled on the service manual. Wow, weird. 3.3 at 350 volt. And another 47. Excellent capacitance. ESR is not the greatest, but whatever. Again, above and beyond capacitance. ESR is not terrible. Again, above and beyond capacitance. ESR is not great nor terrible. Let's see, these were the 10,000. That's kind of what I expected. This meter doesn't do 10,000. Drat. These were 4,700. It must be a parallel or something. And if they are, I'd expect it to go to about 9,600. Kind of hard to tell from the tracks. Anyway, let's move on. .643 at 0.25. And that one's supposed to be 1,000. Those little ones must be in parallel. 50 at 0.03. Yeah, so 47. At 0.03. That was another 47. Yep. And out here at the edges are 3.3, 3.6, 0.04. Excellent. So I'd say we've got a few here that could use a looking at. I'm really curious to take this heatsink off. So it looks like I've got LM340 and 7905 bolted to this side of the heatsink, and 6 bolts on the bottom, and then possibly 2 on the top. Looks like it goes to an IC. That is a massive, massive heatsink. I'm going to take the top off the flyback transformer just to see if it was dirty down in there, although I can kind of see that bottom cutout. It looks fine. I don't see any components or anything under there, so just leave that alone. It's soldered in a couple spots. No biggie. And I've got thermal compounds, so nothing stopping me from taking these out. Beware of some thermal compounds. There are some very, very toxic compounds out there. And I sure can't tell you how to tell them apart either. I've got a flat washer and lock washer on each of the 6 screws on the heatsink, as well as a locking compound. Sure enough, 2 more electrodes hidden down in there. .47, 0.47. This one is not marked for its negative side. Maybe that's what the NP is, I don't know. It's not like the rest. The rest were pretty obvious. Yeah, obviously it's in parallel with some of the other ones. Yeah, there's our plus sign again. It's not on the one that's clearly marked. Weird. Again, in parallel with some other caps. I believe there was one write-up I heard where the guy removed these caps and then soldered them to this side of the board so that you wouldn't have to remove the heatsink to get to them ever again. It's a really good idea. So I see no reason not to do it now. Besides the fact they're in parallel with something, I can't really test them. So I'm going to go ahead and, you know, that heatsink compound is pretty dry. Looks like it needed replaced anyway. I'm definitely going to wash my hands after touching that. I'm going to start removing a few of these caps and retesting and maybe replacing. If I figure out how to do it, I'll see if I can test these 10,000 microfarad caps. It'll be 10 millifarad. Wow. Okay, so I had, I think, 5 caps marked to recheck. For instance, this one right here was a 47 microfarad, but it was showing like something like 8 ohms ESR. Once I removed it, you know, 0.1 or less than 0.1 ohms ESR. So the in-circuit readings were off on all these. I believe the same thing was happening on this 1000 microfarad cap. Once removed, it was perfect. These 1000 ohms or 1000 microfarad caps over here are part of the plus and minus 9 volt rails, I believe. So they're not really in series, but one of them does have its anode on ground. So that's why it was only reading half when I tried to read each of them. So when I took each of them out of circuit, they read perfectly fine. The only one that I actually ended up replacing was this 10 microfarad cap, and I only replaced it because the 10 microfarad cap that I had in stock was just a little bit less ESR. Otherwise, I think it was fine and probably would have lasted a good long while. So you got a Vectrex and it has these Jamicon caps inside of it, you're probably doing okay unless something really stupid happened to them. So I might simply clean it up a little bit and slap it back together here. A little caution on the heatsink situation. I cleaned off all the old crap so I can put on new. And there are 2 little pieces. I think this is Mylar. It kind of cracked and you can see little threads in it, so I think it's Mylar. And the other piece right there, obviously this one goes on this bar between that IC and the bottom of the heatsink, but this one goes in between the 7905 and the side of the heatsink, which will be on the very end. The one further in on the heatsink up here, this is the 7905. This is the LM340. This is 5 volts and this is minus 5 volts. The tab on 5 volts is grounded, but the tab on minus 5 volts is not. So it's insulated by that little piece right there. And you could put heatsink compound on both sides. When you put it back together, it'll be fine. Here's a better look at the logic board after a good wash. And as I said I would do, I'm going to pull these 3 ICs. Just so that I could reset them in the sockets. I cannot get under that one. Looks perfectly fine to me. But since I got them out, I might as well give the legs a little brush. This is a stainless steel brush. I'm wiping the insides of the legs because this socket only has wipers that touch the inside of the legs. Same there, they look fine. Socket looks fine. They all seem to have a fairly good grip on the ICs as well. They're not just falling out. Although I do still prefer turn pin sockets like this, even over dual wipe stuff. These hold better and they're repeatable. You can just insert and pull ICs all day on these and it never seems to affect them. Okay, so everything else seems to be looking good. Kind of look like maybe the legs were touching on these transistors, but they're not. So other than cleaning up the case, I think the boards are ready to go back together. So I think I'm gonna finish cleaning and put it all back together and retest. Okay, I've got it all back together. At least I hope so. A lot cleaner. Volume control still works, but Looks like I may have done it a bit of disservice. I don't think it's producing quite as good as image as it was before. It's still jumping around. Brightness control still works, but you can see that the lines are not intersecting as they should. So I'm going to have to get in there and adjust it in properly, which what I really need is the service cart, and I don't have any carts. So what I might end up doing is either getting a hold of or making a multi-cart, some kind of just, you know, ROM cart, flash cart. What the flash cart will do, or what the service cart, it puts a grid on there so you can dial everything in. It runs several different tests anyway, and it's all detailed out in the service manual so that you can dial everything in properly. So instead of making anything better, I've made it worse, but kind of to be expected. You know, I had all the boards in and out, apart and everything. I probably what happened is I accidentally hit some of these pots. Like there's two right here with thumb wheels on them. There's one here, and there's a couple on the power board, maybe more than a couple. But anyway, it's clean and back together. Probably up next is I'm going to work on the audio buzz. There's a couple really easy mods we can do to it to really lessen that. So that right there will go away, or at least be, I mean, the volume is all the way down, you can still hear the buzz. Okay. Get rid of that buzz and move on to adjusting it in, and see what else we can come up with.